Next, we have Jutta Steiner of Parity Technologies, who has spoken at Techonomy before, but her company has made a lot of progress in the interim. Hi, Jutta, there you are.
Hi, David.
She is the CEO of a company based on blockchain technology that is really, really ambitious. And Jutta, prior to co-founding Parity, which is both in London and Berlin, and you're in London right now, is that right?
I'm in Berlin right now.
You're in Berlin now, okay. Anyway, in addition to her work there, prior to that, she and her co-founder had been critical programmers in the Ethereum central group. She was head of security at Ethereum. Her co-founder was the chief technology officer for the Ethereum group. And so she has a background with Ethereum and now is taking on blockchain to a new level. We're going to start with a video, which Josh is going to queue up, and it's made by Parity, and we'll let that explain what's going on here.
This is a blockchain. Blockchains can be useful for all sorts of things, from improving open access to financial services to providing a better, safer way to manage our data online. Blockchains are used to build applications for gaming, supply chain logistics, social media, the Internet of Things, and more. But up until now, protocol limitations have made blockchain technology impractical for most real-world use cases. Networks composed of a single blockchain, for example, can only process a limited number of transactions. If too many transactions are submitted at once, a bottleneck occurs, causing delays and increased transaction fees. Meet the Polkadot relay chain. This is the heart of the Polkadot network. All blockchains on Polkadot are connected here, like spokes connected to the hub of a wheel. Each blockchain connected to the relay chain can be optimized for a specific use case. This allows teams to incorporate exactly the functionality they need and offers greater efficiency and security than building on a general-purpose blockchain. Teams can also drastically reduce the build time of their custom blockchain by building it with Substrate, our modular development framework. The relay chain allows Polkadot to process transactions from all chains in the network at the same time, drastically increasing scalability. This simultaneous transaction processing, also called parallel processing, is why blockchains on Polkadot are called parachains. The relay chain also provides a secure way for chains to communicate with each other. Polkadot's cross-chain messaging scheme allows chains to exchange any type of data. For example, a token, an account balance, or even information from the real world, like a stock price or the final score of a sporting event. This interoperability promotes innovation on new types of services that leverage the specific capabilities of different chains, for example, for decentralized finance applications. So, what about governance? Other blockchain protocols often have a small group of stakeholders making crucial decisions in an opaque way for the entire network. Polkadot is governed transparently on-chain by all stakeholders who wish to participate by proposing and voting on referenda, using Polkadot's native token, the DOT. Individual parachain teams are completely sovereign and free to govern their own blockchains in any way they see fit. When it comes to upgrades, the process for updating conventional blockchains can cause a hard fork, a divergence in the chain that can take months of work, and risks splitting a community in two. Polkadot is the first protocol to enable forkless, on-chain upgrades. This capability means teams can bring new features to their blockchain on Polkadot, easier and faster than with any other protocol. Polkadot also enables bridges to other networks like Bitcoin or Ethereum for cross-network functionality and communication. Never before has there been a protocol for connecting diverse blockchains together and allowing them to communicate safely with each other at scale in a decentralized way. Polkadot makes blockchain technology accessible and practical for teams innovating real-world applications for a better future. This is Blockchain Unbounded. Are you ready to start building.
Okay, thank you. I thought that was it's very complex stuff, and that's an effort
A
to
lot of
really try to
information.
explain it a little more simply. I wanted to just make two observations before I start, asking you to say why it's all important and how you got here. One thing that my observation journalistically is what Parity is trying to do with Polkadot and its other technologies is, in effect, to build a new kind of operating system for the internet, the next generation internet. That's why we wanted to have you here. This is an incredibly ambitious undertaking, and many people, including you, believe that blockchains are the tool to build more secure, better governed, more fair, privacy-centric internet applications of the future. So to build an operating system for that is a big deal. And the other thing I would just want to note for our audience that they probably don't know is that the DOT, which is a coin that your company introduced as part of this project, recently emerged and was finally launched on and begun to be traded. I haven't looked this week, but last I looked, the market capitalization of that coin was about $3.5 billion. I think it was as high as almost $6 billion at one point. So the point is, you've created real value. The coin exists to help govern this whole other set of systems. But let me ask you this. When you think about what you're doing right now, what is the most important aspect of it to you? Why is it most important for you to be doing this project now?
I think it primarily brings me back to when and where I started getting involved with this. Like that was around 2013, the Snowden revelations, and like that full-on realization that as users online, like we lack agency at a fundamental level. Like we're dependent on operators, on governments that I mean, under Snowden, like spy on us, but like we have no agency over our data, like how our identities are managed, like and this is, I mean, with social media, we see how this is leveraged in a really bad way, and that's really what we're trying to do, like provide an alternative way of architecting. I mean, our insight here and our realization is basically that what we're seeing on the application level is basically an outcome of how underneath the internet is architected with centralized servers and then the clients connecting to those servers. And unless we come up with a system on the base layer where the base layer is truly peer-to-peer, you'll replicate these structures on a higher level, and that leads to these dependencies that I described.
So in effect, peer-to-peer is one of the central motivating concepts of everything you're doing. Rather than top-down control. And that's really been the sort of call to arms of the entire Bitcoin blockchain community from the beginning, that it was a way to escape from the control that societally governed, unfairly governed societal institutions might have exerted.
And giving back the agency, so that in the Bitcoin case, like the money that I own, I actually own, and I don't own it via the access that I need through the intermediary, through the bank. Like I'm always in control, indeed.
But what is it about blockchains that make them so central and essential to building this new internet?
Well, it was the first time that like we were able to transact something of value on the internet without an intermediary. Like that was like the key thing that Bitcoin brought, and that then later on we tried to generalize through Ethereum, like proving that you can basically also transact other things peer-to-peer, like proving who I am, or like that I'm 18, for example, and therefore can access like a certain service online, or like buy something. And then now with Polkadot, like we're taking this to the next level, where we're trying to make this really scalable and like build something with really, really good user experience. I would say like until now, basically what has been done primarily was like to show in prototypes, like what could be done. And what we're trying to do at the moment is deliver a system that's actually scalable, has like seamless upgrades, which is something we're just used to these days and which hadn't been there before.
How hard technologically is it to do what you're trying to do?
Oh, it's a lot of work. I mean, it's hard to compare, but it's like it's pretty challenging. There's a lot of things that need to be innovated. That starts on the networking level, but then also further up the stack. Like there's technical things. I think one of the most interesting things at this point is actually to work out how these systems will be governed going forward, because it is a decentralized system. There needs to be a way how we come to an agreement, like how this system can evolve, because it's a software platform, right? Like, and as a software platform, unless you upgrade the system, it will become obsolete. That's what we see all the time with like Windows getting outdated, and like we need to upgrade our systems. And like how do we do this is like a really, really interesting thing to work out also in more generality, like in terms of how should actually systems that everybody depends on be governed. Like certainly it shouldn't be governed by Mark Zuckerberg alone. Like that's for sure. That's what we know. But like how do we do this really in the best way so that's in the interest of the end users?
Well, you know, clearly even video, you know, suggests there's a lot of complexity here. And you're working hard, you know, to deal with that yourselves. I guess, where's my question here? You're at an early stage, right? This is going to take a long time to do it right. I mean, you've bitten off a big bite of technological complexity. You've advanced to the point where you've actually got a product working and you've got a coin in the marketplace which will help contribute to governance. And one of the things that you explained to me when we were prepping for this was that, you know, I think it's very logical, but maybe need to be said. The only reason the coin has any value is because people have confidence in the security of the network that you've built. Could you just talk about that for a second?
Sure. I mean, first of all, maybe let me address the thing. Like, I mean, it certainly is still somewhat early stage with blockchain. That being said, like, there has been a lot of progress, and like what makes the difference between where we're at now and where we were in 2016 when Ethereum launched, like the systems are now scalable. Like there are. And that has been like so far like a very big drawback, and that's one of the elements that we've been working on. Like there's still like a lot of innovation that will happen on the layer, but like the thing that I'm seeing right now is that the system is maturing to a point that real businesses exist on chain. Like there is peer-to-peer lending on chain where individuals and businesses can perform these actions without going through an intermediary. And that's quite powerful if you think of all the asymmetries that we see in, for example, supply chains, where like big companies have a lot of leverage to get cheap access to financing through the big banks, but then a small SME is at the mercy and like has to deal with like really, really bad interest rates. And like something like blockchain can now provide an open platform for doing for these smaller companies or individuals to access like financing at a cost that makes sense.
Right. I mean, as any operating system, your goal with the Polkadot network is to have others build applications on top of it. So
Indeed.
Where do you stand with that?
Indeed, that's also one of the key things we try to address with Polkadot. I mean, Bitcoin, Ethereum, they were largely proof of concept or prototypes that in the end like were a lot more successful than people, I guess, initially thought. It was like something where people wanted to prove what could exist as something for people to become imaginative of what they can build on. Like with Polkadot, we tried to, from the get-go, provide a framework for developers. This is the tool that was mentioned in the little video, Substrate. So from the get-go, we had the developers in mind that need to have a simple framework for building what they want to build. And so that's been where also we've seen now a lot of adoption, people taking this, whether or not they deploy it on Polkadot or not, like it's just the framework that people want to use to build blockchains and thus innovate. So our core belief is going forward. Like there'll be like a lot of different chains, and that will be customized through to the different use cases. That could be like a payment chain, or like a chain that facilitates our identities, like in contrast to Google and Facebook being our identity provider. Like there would be sort of a system customized for only doing that. And the reason why you need this, the reason why you need different chains, is just in order to make things scalable. It's just the way how in computer science you approach breaking down complexity. So that's what we're doing, and making this customization really easy is a key thing for driving innovation, because you now have the framework, and like that just makes it really easily accessible for a programmer to experiment and play with it.
Now, you mentioned some things that are already starting to exist on your architecture, but what would be like some dream scenario? I mean, obviously systems that could potentially provide an identity alternative to Facebook and Google, that's a big deal, very big deal. But what are some other businesses that we might see emerge, and why do they need to have blockchains at the root of them?
So, I mean, in the end, what I strongly believe is like there's, I mean, especially we've seen that now with the pandemic, like we do want more redundancy, right? Like it's really bad to build a system where there is a single point of failure, and like almost anything that we do online at this point like goes through a centralized provider, and that's just not how it should be. Like the fact that like most of the data or a lot of the data it's processed is like centralized in Amazon's data system. Like this is not what we should rely on. It's just a bad architecture instead of having this all more decentralized.
Well, there's so many more things we could discuss. One thing I do want to touch on before we end, I know you said that a lot of the uptake for what you've been doing thus far has been in the developing world. Tell me why that is.
I mean, it's so largely it is like wherever, I mean, there's a gap. I mean, wherever you have stable infrastructure, stable governments, like, I mean, there are alternatives right now, right? I can use PayPal or like a banking system because there's regulation, there's clear oversight, like how these things should happen. But then in places where governments are weak, like how do you build a large scale system where people transact, right? Or corrupt, where people can transact something of real value? And like blockchain in that sense is organization, structure, out of the box, with hard programmed rules that are transparent to everybody and that everybody can rely on. I mean, that's where the early uptake of Bitcoin came from, in places with weak or corrupt governments, basically. And same holds true now with this. Like, if in such places like that, there are businesses that need access to credit, like how do they do this without a functioning, fully blown banking system? Like you use a system like this where you can just program it in a relatively short way and everybody can transparently, openly access it. Like that's basically what we're seeing. So similar to mobile getting adopted, like in those places really quickly, like that's the uptake we're observing here now with blockchain, basically.
Is it your belief, and this is really my last question, that eventually the entire internet will, and all the applications on which we live our lives, will operate using blockchains?
I think so, because they provide this level of redundancy and decentralization that makes systems more secure. I mean, you can always go back and like wherever needed, like simplify things again. But like the key thing is, and it's not just going to be blockchain, right? Like there's different protocols, peer-to-peer, that people are building. But I do think it's the better way, and it is also like how the internet started, right? Like with super decentral infrastructure, computers then getting connected, and just because we lacked the protocols, now we've seen those conglomerates and centralization happening. So yeah, to me, I mean, it's not just that I believe this is what's going to happen. I fundamentally think it's what needs to happen for us to have better systems, better applications again.
Great way to end. Thank you so much, Jutta.
Thank you. Bye.
Congratulations on your ambitious company and career.
Thank you.